What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Altitude Show. I'm your host, Dave Brinker. Today I have Cody Rich on the podcast. I am just getting back from I don't know, a lot of elk hunting. September was awesome. I'm tired, getting back in the groove of things. I've been off the podcast thing for a couple weeks. And this will be the first one back, and then I'm going to do a full wrap on my own this week as well of the September before I head to Idaho and Montana. Cody and I have been friends for a long time. He has a podcast. He's an entrepreneur. We actually grew up as neighbors and didn't even know it. Anyways, great guy. I wanted to hear about his season and kind of go through some of the stuff that I went through. And I hope you guys are all doing great. The Altitude Show is brought to you by Mountain Tough Fitness. I have never felt better during season as I did this year, physically and mentally. I can't think of a time when I gave up going after a bull or going down into a canyon or going up a hill where I was because I didn't feel like I could do it. Like sometimes when you're hunting, you feel like, physically you're like, I'm not going down there. I just don't got it in me. I didn't feel that this year. I felt great most of the time. And I attribute a lot of that to staying pretty consistent on my Mountain Tough all spring and summer. And that program is available to everybody. It's an app. It's Mountain Tough app, MTN Tough app. You download it and you can choose the program you want to do. You don't have to do a program, actually. I just do the daily workout that they put out, and it kicks your ass. But they have levels for everybody, beginners, experts. I highly recommend it. I know you hunters out there are tired from September and you don't want to work out yet, but I highly recommend staying with it. Get back on track. And if you're someone that doesn't hunt, that just wants to get really, really good shape, use the Mountain Tough app. Use my code Dave and you get 20% off. Actually, Dave20 and you get 20% off. Dave20 Mountain Tough. All right. This podcast is also brought to you by Go Hunt. GoHunt.com is the place for all things hunting. Whether you're doing research on units that you want to hunt in the future, or gear that you want to buy, they have an amazing gear shop, or their map software is getting better and better and better all the time. Just about everything you need as a hunter is at GoHunt.com, and anything on there, whether you're subscribing to Go Hunt or you're buying in their gear shop, you can use my code Altitude for 20% off. Go to GoHunt.com, use code Altitude. Last but not least, OutdoorClass.com is a basically masterclass for hunting, and they have amazing classes from the likes of Mark Livesey, Corey Jacobson, Randy Newberg, Remy Warren. Just about everything you can think of to make you a better hunter outdoorsman is on there. OutdoorClass.com, use code Altitude for 20% off. All right, let's kick it off with Cody Rich. Here we go. That's what I'm kind of doing too, sort of. But yeah, I know how you feel. It's weird. It's like it feels fragmented. Like you just get into it and then you got to get out of it and get back to normal life. And then you just get into it again. Then you got to do the same thing again.
Yeah. That's about right.
How was your archery season? Good,
man. Killed a good bull. Got it done. It felt pretty quick. I don't know. Yeah, it was like highs and lows. It was, I missed a really, really great bull. So I was like super bummed and hard on myself. And then thought it wasn't going to come together, and it comes together. It's like classic story. So it did come together. And then it was like, finally, which was funny because it was, a week into season. And then it was like, I sat here and everyone else is hunting. I was like, all right, put me back in, coach. I'm like ready to
go. So you went out early.
I hunted the 7th and I killed on the 15th. So I was out by 16th or 17th, something like that.
Nice. What? Yeah. Tell me a story about your miss, man. I got to commiserate.
Is this on podcast or off?
We're on. Okay. I can edit it out though if you want.
Oh no, you're good. The only reason I asked is I feel like I told it on mine too.
Yeah. No, my people want to hear it. My people love hearing about it. One thing I've learned in the social media world, as you know, is people are a bit tired of highlight reels and they like hearing real stories.
Yeah.
So if you scroll through Instagram in September, all you see is giant dead elk.
Yeah.
And you don't see all the people that are out there missing and failing. So let's hear it, man. I'll match you too.
No, and like a lot of it is like, do you want the short buddy version or do you want the long version? So the long version is that like in some ways I would say like since I moved to Montana, so I came from Oregon, obviously. You and I lived pretty close at the time. And I came to Montana and I was like, man, I just want to hunt big bulls, And I was surrounded by people who hunted big bulls, and I was like, I want to play at that level. So I did, and I kind of got my butt kicked for a lot of years. I was like just trying to figure it out. I come from the Coast Range of Oregon, so hunting, let's say eastern Montana, is very different, right? And so like even finding elk took me a little bit, and so it was kind of a struggle. And over those couple of years where I didn't succeed, like you start to have these self doubts. So like inevitably, you're like, I felt like I was super confident. I could call on any elk and I could kill. And then I moved to Montana and I start like basically trying to put away the calls and find elk in the prairie and all this. And so like you start to like have these self-doubts, if you will. And so by the end of last year, I was like, man, I just need some wins. And this became evident kind of in the off season. I was like, I just need to like chalk up some wins. I just need to get back and like win, right? Like, that's how you kind of get that confidence back. And like, I wouldn't say I was lacking certain confidence, but I still had confidence. Like, I think I went into this year with as high in confidence in my shooting ability as ever. Like, that was one thing. I was like, well, how do you fix confidence? So I was like, well, be confident in things you can control. And so like off season, I started way earlier than usual. I, was dialed in my gear. Like, I felt like my shooting was amazing. So I go into this year and I'm like, okay, get some wins. And in the years past, and like last couple of years, this is some people get mad when I say things like this, but I wouldn't go in after elk that weren't big, right? And a lot of this came from a couple of years ago. I like went into this area and this bull comes screaming in and I shoot him, and he's a great bull and most people would be super stoked. But one of my mentors who literally only shoots giants was like, yeah, that's kind of why I don't like go in. I want to be able to make that decision while I'm not in the moment. Like that bull's not screaming in my face. I was like, yeah, I get that. I get that now. It's really hard to be like pass on a bull when he's screaming in your face. So I've kind of just avoided calling elk altogether, maybe here or there, but like for the most part, I try to like be far away, make a decision, and then move in and try to get a shot. And so this leads to not calling very many elk in. So this year I was like, day one, I didn't really find any. I did find some elk super far away. They were kind of not in their normal spot. So day two, I go in and I kind of follow this elk, and he's kind of bugling, just moving away. And I keep following him. And he goes into this little basin. And normally, like in the years past, I would just come back that evening, sit high and glass and see, what was in the area. Because the last thing you want to do is like bump a herd of elk after it takes you days to find them. And so I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going in there. I'm going to call it an elk. And so I do. I slip in close and I set up and I call. And I was just going to cow call, and I had my decoy, and like a spike comes in, and then I rip a bugle as the spike runs away. And this bull kind of pipes off a little bit, like he's a little more aggressive, and he's like coming. I was like, oh yeah. I'm getting excited. So I rip off and we kind of bugle back and forth, and here he comes. Like he comes running in, and like I had moved up a little bit, and here comes this bull, and I could tell he's missing his entire right side. So he's like a 7 by nothing. And I was stoked. I probably would have shot this bull if he was a 7 by, whatever, regular. But he comes flying in, and I'm like, I'm going to pass. It's day one, day two, I guess. And he comes like 10 yards. And that was enough of like, man, I got this still. Like it was that confidence boost that I needed without having to shoot this elk. And so I was pretty stoked. I was on cloud 9. I loved it. And so the next day, I go out and I find an elk pretty late. So it's day 3. Was it? Yeah. So trying to remember. Oh no, I came back that night. So it was the next day that night actually. So I find some more elk. I was like, I'll move in on these elk. So we move in on them. Next morning, I get close and I see a big bull, like the bull I've been looking for a number of years. And I'm like, oh, so now my confidence is back up. Like, I'm like, I still got it. I found a giant, like one of the earliest I've ever found a big bull. And I was stoked. I was like, I'm going to go in and shoot this bull. So a little bit of backstory, and this is where it stings a little bit. We'll see if yours stings worse than this. So as you know, my dad passed away when I was pretty young, and he was a big elk hunter, and I always like kind of consider like me when I'm elk hunting, I'm with my dad, and his birthday is September 10th, and I've always said like I'll never pass a bull on September 10th. So I find this big bull. It's in the morning. It's September 10th. I'm like, go, like we're killing. So I get in there and follow him a little bit. And the herd kind of does something weird. So like 9:30 in the morning, they kind of, all of a sudden they're like fragmenting. There's like cows going in different directions. And I'm like, that's weird. And, like all of a sudden he's missing. Like I think he went off with some other cows. And I was like, man, that whole situation was kind of weird. Like, he's got to still be right there. I couldn't find him. And there's only a couple cows I could see. So I back out and I go in that night and I'm like, confidence is high. I'm going in and killing this bull. It's September 10th. We're getting it done. Like it's happening. And I guess a little bit of backstory is like over the last couple of years, I feel like I've treated big bulls like they're special, like maybe that I don't deserve to kill one. And so it's always like I treat them different, like with kid gloves, whereas if it was a regular 6-point, I just walk in there with all the confidence in the world and I'd kill this bull. So this year I was like, if I get on a big bull, I'm just going to treat it like he's an everyday 6. Like I'm just walking there and kill it like it's any other elk. So I get in that night and kind of get up on this knob, and I bumped a couple of elk coming in that weren't where I thought they were going to be. And then I started getting worried that the whole herd had moved. I was like, like hopefully it wasn't bad, but it's still early. And there's just kind of elk everywhere. So it was kind of a weird deal. And I was seeing like onesie twosies. I saw a spike over here. I saw a cow and a 5-point, and it was just like nothing made sense other than the fact that like in the morning they all kind of separated. And then I see this big bull, and he like goes up the ridge right where they were, and I was like, he's here. And so I just take off, and I like wind's good, everything's good, head over there. And as I get to the top of the hill, I actually had my gaiters on because it was raining. So I pull my gaiters off, kind of got like everything, get my pack situated. And I just climb up on the hill. And up on the hill is this like sweet pea brush that is probably waist high, and it's everywhere. And I was like, how is this ever going to work? Like, how am I ever going to get close to this bull? This is like, no way. It's so loud. It would be impossible to stalk through. And I was like, man, I might have to like just call him to me or something. I was like, this is never going to work. I was like, maybe if I set a decoy. So I'm like running through the options in my head. I get to the top, and like I can go like a little bit here, and there's like a grass chunk with a couple trees, and it's fairly open terrain. And I was like, get up there, and I was like, let's just let things develop, see what happens. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm kind of glassing around, and I bet 2 or 3 minutes goes by, and all of a sudden I see a cow. Cow is 100 yards coming at me. I'm like, oh, there's a cow. Okay, we don't know if it's a herd. It's a cow. And then I see like another calf coming behind her, but I'm like, okay, still just a calf. And the cow kind of feeds left to right. And the calf comes like more towards me. Well, there's a dip between me and this calf. This calf is coming towards me. And I remember thinking like, that's not ideal. Hopefully she doesn't come like all the way over here, like cause a situation. And all of a sudden the bull that I've been looking for years, like shoots out of this dip that was between me and this calf. This bull was like 50 yards from me that whole time, 10 minutes. And I'm like, gah, I just couldn't see him, like the topography or whatever. And I'm like, oh, and so I knock an arrow real quick. And he like runs, he's chasing this calf. And I was just like so frustrated that I'm like, oh, he was in range, and he stops. And I range him, and I was like, because I remember looking like he's in range, and I range and I can't get a range because this grass. So I'm trying to get taller, but I don't want to like get, I'm in the open. And I finally get a range, and I remember thinking like, let's just wait and see what happens. And then cause it was a little bit far, I didn't want to rush a shot, and he just stands there. And I was like, you know what? Like, I got this. I've been shooting all year. Like, my confidence is high. You got this. Take my time, draw my bow back, and I shoot. and I smoked the rock behind him. Like absolutely just arrow to rock. And I was like, what happened instantly? And he kind of runs up. He doesn't know what happened. He like runs out and he's like over by the cow now. And there's a tree between me and him. And he just like sits there and he barks at me. And finally he takes off. And of course I like stand up and I range, and he was 9 yards closer than where I ranged. Like I was trying to range. I rushed the range. I caught that rock behind him and I smoked the rock behind him. And I was like, what a gimme. Like, I've been waiting for this bull. I've been looking for this bull for like 5 years, and this, like, I misranged it, dude. I was like, and the worst part was like, I was within 50 yards of this bull. Like I was in range and he was just there, and it all fell apart.
Oh no, dude. I hate ranging. Ranging for me. So, I just started hunting with a compound, 6 years ago?
So you don't even have experience.
Before that, I never had Yeah. Well, I mean, I played golf my whole life. I'm pretty good at it, actually. It was just with my eyes. Sometimes I'm better at it with my eyes than I am with the damn rangefinder. But ranging is an art, especially when you're hunting in brushy country. It's a frickin' art. And I think people that have done it for a long time are just really good at it. And I'm getting better, but still every year, my most massive failures in compound bow hunting is range issues. And I was trying to count the other day on how many bulls, and I take credit for where I fuck up, but I think I counted six in the last 3 years that I missed because of range issues. Now, a lot of my range issues are from the Coast Range in Oregon, where you're like, when you get in a setup or you got all coming through, you're trying to range through like holes and ferns and salmon berries, and I try to do it multiple times. You just hold it down and go all around until you feel like you got the right one, but still, dude, so often you're not getting the right range, and you fucking miss. You miss, and sometimes you miss bad. I'll commiserate with you, okay? So we have so many parallels, Cody, because I've been really pushing myself to try to up my standards the last several years. And last year, I lived a lifelong dream, and I said I was going to shoot a 300-inch Roosevelt or nothing, eat my tag, and I did it. And I did it in like 8 days. So my confidence, and I killed several other things last year with, one shot, clean kills, had a very good, clean year, great confidence building year. And I've killed 7 bulls in the last 5 years with my bow. It's like feeling really good. Some small ones, some okay ones, and this one last year. And so this year I'm like, okay, I found a couple awesome Roosevelts again, and same plan. I can do it again. Let's do this. And anyways, long story short, the second week of the season, I got a shot at one of my target bulls, which is right around a 300-inch, 290 6-point. It's a for those that don't know, Boone and Crockett Roosevelt's 270. Actually, it's 275 for all time. I think 260 something for. It's they're different than Rockies. Okay, so
yeah,
a 290 inch. That's just it's a massive bull. Anyways, he was in a shooting lane right at the end of my. I don't want to shoot over 60 yards. I'm just not. I'm not there at an elk. But he was standing there and the sun was shining on him broadside, and he had no idea I was there. I did not call him in. And I'm like, and he was just in this huge hole in the timber. And I'm like, you know what? I got this. I got all the time in the world. My wife filmed it. All the time in the world. Drew back. Felt good. The release broke. And wham! It hit a tree. And I'm like, what in the fuck? And you can see the video on my Instagram. I look back at my life like, what in the hell? I had to, like, all I could see was the elk. It was shining in the sun. And anyways, long story short, I shoot a heavier arrow, so my arc is always a little bit more than I, anticipate. And there was an alder at the top of my shooting lane leaning over, and it caught the bottom end of it, halfway to the elk. And he never even knew there was a bow hunter in the area. And I never saw him again, by the way. So fast forward 2 weeks later, I find, just by happenstance, a bull that I didn't even know about. Well, I did. I just didn't. didn't trust myself. I saw a bull in August that I knew it looked big, but I kind of talked myself into him being normal. Anyways, long story short, I find him September 15th, and it's a giant Roosevelt. This one is like in another class. It's not as big as the one I got last year, but it's like in that 310 to 320 class, and he's crowned 6x7, just an old gnarly bull, and he's got like 30 cows. Anyways, I get on him this first evening, and I had him in front of me under 100 yards for 2 hours, and several times I had him at 70 yards for like a half hour, and I did not shoot because I knew I was going to get a better opportunity. I let a raghorn walk by me. I let a couple spocks walk by me. Anyways, I had to leave him. It got dark, and I'm like, I'm not taking a long shot tonight. He's not going anywhere. I'm backing out of here, and I'm going to come back in the morning. Mouse my way up there, get back almost in the same position as I was before. They haven't gone anywhere. And they're a little bit more spread out, but I spent about an hour and a half kind of jockeying into position, and I get up within 50 yards of his cows, and they're spread out all around me. The wind is howling perfect, a little bit of fog, so they're going to stay out a little bit later. And I got in a good position, and I just stayed there, and I had elk in front of me for 3 hours. 3 hours I had his cows and the satellite bulls in range, and he was just constantly out at about 100, 150. Well, pretty soon I hear, and I see his antlers running like towards me. And then I see this little 4-point bull. He's chasing this bull right to me. And this 4-point bull runs up to me like at 25 or 30 yards. But the big bull stops at like 70. But when he did that, some of the cows funneled right to me. Like he started pushing his cow, and I knew they were going to kind of go where I was, or at least I hoped I knew that that's what they were going to do. Right. Anyways, a wall of cows starts feeding towards me. And now all of a sudden I'm kind of in the red zone where I know eventually I'm going to get busted. And they're like, I have half his cows within, I don't know, they were like at 40 yards at this point, and they're feeding right to me. But he went back out to like 100, and I'm like, shit, I'm going to get screwed. Anyway, so I laid down. Because I was in the ferns, and I just did not want to. I'm like, I'm going to lay here until I hear him come back, because he was being real noisy. And as soon as I hear him come back, I'm going to get up and try to shoot him, obviously. Pretty soon I hear glunk, 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 glunk. And here he comes back. And I peek over the ferns, and I can see his tines, and he's chasing more cows to me. So I kind of, first I got my bow, because I've been tired of holding my bow for 3 hours. So I had it laid on the ground. I got it, and I see his tines cut. Like, he has now entered bow range. He's at 50, and he's trotting closer. So I drew behind the ferns, and I came up, and I did it without getting caught. And but before I drew, he chased that 4-point again right in front of me. And the 4-point is like 20 yards, and the bull chased him. But as soon as he came into the opening, he turned with his ass to me, and I'm like, shit. Anyways, he circles back. I get my bow drawn without getting caught, which was amazing. I don't know how I did that. And he goes into this, he starts to enter this spot where I knew the shot was going to come. I was hoping it wouldn't, but I'm like, I bet you he's going to walk right there. And it was a hole in the fir trees. It was probably the size of 2 or 3 basketballs. And the furthest I could see through it was 44, and the closest was about 30. And he's coming to that opening, so I'm at full draw, and I just get on the opening. And when he steps into the opening, I stopped him, and he's perfectly broadside. And I figured he was somewhere between 30 and 40. So I put my 40 on his heart. And I mean, dude, it's dead. Like, it's just so dead. Like, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is going to work out. These are the things. I already got it mounted in my house.
Yeah. Do I make roasts, or, what kind of steaks are we cutting up now?
What's the text? Do I text the photo of the crowns laying in the ferns, or, So the release breaks, and I don't hear it hit. I don't hear anything. It's like dead silence. And I scramble for my binoculars, because he's just trotting. And I put it up, and I look, and he ain't got nothing. There's nothing wrong with him. He's like chasing cows again. And I'm like, what the fuck? You've got to be kidding me. And so I start glassing, and pretty soon I can see my arrow sticking in the dirt down there. So I actually chased him up the hill and I almost got another shot twice. I got back into that bull twice. Long story short, never saw him again this season. He never came back. I spent the last, anyways, he never came back. I've never seen him again. I went down there, clean, nothing. I have no idea how that arrow, like, if that would have been a target, it would have been almost impossible for your arrow not to hit it. I have no idea how it did. It had to
It's
have
more
hit one of those
impressive that it hit the dirt.
Yeah. I'm like, dude, I mean, there was 20 cows standing around him. I'm lucky I didn't wound him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How did that not hit an elk? It was amazing. But, thankfully it didn't make a bad hit or whatever. Okay, so that's failure number 2, Cody. Now we're going to get to the really sad story because I'm being very transparent about this. Last week, there was this bull that I'd gotten on camera several times. And he's a really nice, I've known about him for a few years. He's on a very small piece of property that I can hunt, but I rarely go there because there's only a few elk. But it's a really nice, heavy, old 5x6. Just a nice bull, but not exactly what I was looking for, but a really, really nice Roosevelt. He's never going to get any bigger than this. He's been the same for like 3 years. And I went up there and he happened to be there and I got on him in the morning. Again, I haven't been calling very much either this year, so I just hung out around him. It didn't work out. He went to his bedding area. I left him, hung out at my truck all day. Took a nap, and I'm like, I'm gonna go back up there. I know exactly where they're bedded. I'm gonna go sneak up in there at 4:00, and I'm just gonna hang out and I'm gonna kill them tonight. Sneak up there at 4:00. I spend like an hour literally pulling ferns apart, and like I made it silently within 100 yards of their beds, which was. I could not believe that I successfully did that. I was totally planning on it, like busting them and just going to dinner.
Right.
I get up in there and nothing's happening. And I'm sitting there texting. And I'm like, well, this bull doesn't get hunted a lot. I'm going to try to bugle him in. I'm just going to try it. In fact, I think I texted my dad. I'm going to try to bugle this thing in. So I just gave him a light challenge bugle because I knew he could hear me. Nothing happened. Sat there. Gave another light challenge bugle, and I hear a stick pop. I'm like, well, that sounds like an elk. So I peek up, and down in the viney maples below me, I could see his tines coming up through them silently. And I'm like, holy shit, this is working. So I stick an arrow on my string, and I hide in the ferns again. These ferns are like waist tall, so they make a perfect little hideout. Because he was kind of looking, and he was way out of range. So I was going to let him come up, and then I was going to shoot, or come up to shoot. And so. A little while passed, and I peeked over, and I could see him getting closer. So I got in the prone position, and anyways, he came out, and I actually ranged all the things that I could, but that timber's so separated, like it's big old growth timber, and you got like 2 or 3 trees, but there's like 20 yards between all of them. So like basically, you're guessing. You're like, that's a 22-yard tree, that's a 40 something, and then anything in between, I'm guessing. He comes up to like 35 and goes behind a tree I draw, and he comes around, he kind of goes a little further, and I'm like thinking, okay, 40. And he comes out at an opening, and the first time I tried to stop him, my reed was backwards in my mouth, and I'm like, shit. So I got it right and stopped him, and stopped broadside, and I was at full draw, and I'm like, all right, 40, no problem. Pull through. I was actually fairly calm, reasonably. Pulled through. Didn't sound like a like the what you want to hear, but I did hear it hit. And he trots off, and I hear, and I'm like, okay, that's a good sign. And finally, I can see him. And I see the arrow, the broadhead side of the arrow sticking out of the middle, what I thought was the middle of him, which I still think is the middle of him. And about halfway up, but definitely back. It wasn't like behind the shoulder. And so I thought, okay, that's liver, but he's done. So I just sat down and I just watched him for like 20 minutes. It was too brushy, and he was like 80 yards away to get a shot. And he walked off. And he walked off real slow, ears back. And I'm like, oh, he'll be laying right there in the morning, So I just snuck out of there. It got dark, stuck out of there, and went back with pack frames and my dad and my son the next morning. And after 3 days of looking, that elk is still not recovered. And I had to literally get permission from the adjacent landowner. I had to call the game warden, let him know that I was doing this. Like, it was a huge mess, an absolute mess. And it was awful. And it still is.
Ugh.
I have no idea what happened to that elk. I don't think it can survive.
Right.
But I could be wrong. My cameras haven't picked them up. I have a few cameras up there, haven't got them on camera, unfortunately. But that's how my season ended, man. It sucked. It was really, and I was
That's
talking
the worst.
I've been talking to a lot of people about it. Not that this is the first time this has ever happened to me, but I've been really thinking a lot about it. And the more people you talk to, the more you realize this does happen a lot. And
I think, yeah.
people just don't talk about it, but it's a pretty traumatic thing, us hunters have to deal with. If you're going to hunt, it's going to happen to you. And so I decided this year, usually I would not talk about it. We're all kind of trained, you don't say anything when you're hitting, the anti-hunters and this and that. And that is true there is validity to that. But I wanted to share that story because failure is what's going to happen. I came off a really high last year and I got kicked right in the ball sack this year. And
dude, that's the worst too. Do you feel like as soon as that shot went off, did you have the oh shit feeling? Like, cause you kind of missed twice already.
mm-hmm.
So confidence is not super high. Even if you think your shooting ability is good, I found that there's a difference between shooting ability and confidence in shooting ability and that of like pulling the trigger on an animal. And I was thinking about that this year, and we can kind of get into the second half of my story, which plays a lot into it. Very similar. But did you feel that like, oh shit, or like, what was your feeling right after that shot?
My feeling was, how do I describe this? I was like, okay, like fall over. Like I did everything right. I did everything I'm supposed to do. Like that had to have got him.
Did you watch the impact, or did you like? What was your initial?
It was kind of dim. I couldn't. It was in the dark timber, and it was in the evening, so I couldn't see my arrow fly. But it felt good, and I know where my pin was. Now, afterwards, this goes back to our original point. Afterwards, I ranged it, and it was 5 yards further than I thought it was. So now I'm wondering. Now that I've thought it back through, I'm wondering if I caught him low. Like kind of that low liver, like nothingness down. And it's not nothing because it does eventually kill them, but it's not like it can take a while, even a day.
And I do think Roosevelts are so much harder. Like I've been on a lot of, I've lost Roosevelts. Like I've had that exact same situation happen on Roosevelts. And like it's crazy how thick that brush is. How many blood trails we've been on and like we walked 50 yards from an elk and didn't see it. And like people find that, like crazy, but like, that happens a lot in Roosevelt's. So, yeah. So I'll tell the second half of my story and
sorry, I got off on a tangent.
No, it's totally applicable. So like here I am down in the dumps. I just like missed the opportunity of, a great bull. And I'm just like, I was really, really trying to play the mentally strong game and be like, you're only, it's the Tiger Woods quote. You're only as good as your last shot. Like just, shake it off. Dude, that's real tough to do. Like it's easy to say. It's great on paper, but it's real tough to do.
It is.
And so
really
I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go call in, like calling in that 7-0 essentially gave me a boatload of confidence. I was like, I'm just going to go call in another elk. I don't care if 5 point, whatever, I'm going to call. So I spent the next few days. I didn't find elk. I hadn't seen any good bulls, but I was calling in elk. I think I went, of the 7 days I was out there, I think 6 of them, I took a selfie with an elk that was under bow range. So like I was in elk every single day, seeing good bull. So slowly your confidence kind of gets back up. You're like, okay, we got this, but I still wasn't finding, shooters. And so what was it that day? It's in my notes, but towards the end, I had basically an 8-day stretch, and then my wife had a conference. I had to go home for 5 days, and I was gonna be able to come back out, but I had to go home. So I found a big bull, another good bull, not as big, but I didn't even put a stock on. I was like dogging this herd and almost got a couple shots. I was pretty stoked about it. It was like, getting back in there. And actually that morning I followed this bull so close, like almost happened 2 or 3 different times, like just dogging this herd, and it didn't. And he kind of like, he caught my movement and he busts out of there. Well, he kind of goes over to this area where I'd been seeing a group of cows that had no bull in it. Cause I found these cows and I like, look, no bull. And then the day before there was like a small 6, but I was like, eventually a big bull is going to show up. Like, I'm going to know it. Well, the bull I'm chasing kind of goes that way. So I was like, well, let's go check midday. I'll just go try to glass them up again. They kind of bed out in the sagebrush. There's not a lot of trees. I should be able to find them. So I do that. Sure enough, I find him. I get closer, still no bull, but I can't see the whole herd. So I'm kind of just watching him, hanging out most of the day. And there's a bull bugling like from his bed, but I can't find him. Like, I'm glassing and I'm like, man, I cannot find this bull anywhere. So I actually took a nap. I thought they were going to move again because they'd kind of been moving midday. They didn't. They just kind of moved a little bit more into the shade, but I still could never see the whole herd. And I was like, gosh, there's got to be a bull in there. You know, now I'm convinced, right? Like, I've been watching for 3 or 4 hours. Surely there's a bull in there. So I kind of moved around, and eventually I found this bull that was bugling, and, you know, he's bedded on the edge of like some timber strip, and I can't see his horns at all. But I'm like, you know what? I said I wasn't going to pass any like good bulls. Like, he's got a good frame. I'm going to shoot him. I don't know how big it is. Maybe that's better. And so I was like, I'm just going to put a stock on this bull. So 3:30, I kind of head that way. Wind's good. And he's laying down 800 yards away from where these cows are. So I'm like, he's going to get up and go to those cows. Surely.
800?
Yeah. Which in that country it's open country. So it's like across this little draw. And so he's like, you know, he's bedded, and I sneak in. I get to like 65, and he's like, he's kind of behind these trees, and I can't tell if he's like 55 or 65, maybe 70. Like, I'm just looking through the trees. It was a little bit difficult, but he's right there. I can see him, and I have good lanes. And I'm like, if he goes towards the cows when he gets up, he'll cross in front of me at like 45 or 50. And, you know, he won't go backwards because there's just nothing but tree. Like, it's pretty thick right there. So and like, there's one other shooting lane. So if I go any closer, I'm like, I'm giving up one shooting lane and all in on the other. So like, I'll sit here, and if I have to get closer, that's fine. So I sit for an hour and a half, and, you know, he just lays there, bugles a couple times. And sure enough, he get like at 6:15, he gets up and like just fights his way through the trees, like the one way I didn't think he would go. And he like just goes right through the trees. I'm like, oh no. And I was like, okay. But he still has no idea I exist. Literally just walked the opposite direction. And by that time, all the cows were up, and like, they're all on their feet out in the open. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. You know, I'm thinking. And of course, he just goes the other way. And so I kind of just like start following him. You know, I got no shoes on. I'm just following this elk. And he crosses this, like, he's going to cross this one path, but it's like 65. And I was like, I just don't know. You know, I don't want to stop him in this one lane, because if I cow call and stop him, I know the shot clock's ticking. So I just keep following him, and he kind of starts arcing to my left, and I see his antlers, and there's like a line through the trees, and I can see his antlers going through it. And I'm like, if I could get to that tree, that would be the shot. And so I just cow call right from where I was, and I only can see his antlers, and I like hustle up to this tree. And going back to your point, and I've said this over the years, like, I've missed like you had said, I missed a lot of shots on bad ranges, and I'm always like, range the elk. I know people are like, range everything, and, you know, then guess what he is from the tree. I've had more mistakes.
I think that's the right answer. It's just really hard to do. But
dude, yeah.
We'll finish your story. Let's talk about that after you're done.
So, and I've said this a lot of times because I've made those mistakes, and then I've been like, I am ranging the elk. I don't care if I get busted, I'm ranging the elk. And so as I'm walking up this tree, I'm just, you know, buzzing that rangefinder like it's a shot, you know, I'm just like, da, 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 and I'm shooting the trees behind him. I shoot the trees 62, and I shoot him 60, like on the dot. And I'm like, money, 60. And to me, like, 60 is I love 60. I kill a lot of stuff at 60. That's what I shoot. When I walk out right here in my range, I shoot 60 almost constantly. And so I'm like, that confidence was like, yes, you know, like, I get the 60. And so I range him 60. Now I have to like put my release on my bow, have to draw back in sight. So I draw back in sight and like settle my 60. But mentally in my head is like shot clock. Because I just had to move 5 yards after I stopped him. I had to range him in view of him, and I had to like draw my bow back. So like in my head, I'm like, shot clock.
So you stopped him before you ranged him?
Dude, I had 5 more yards to go, but I saw his antlers crossing a gap, and I was like, that's my shot. And I cow called. And I was like, then I still had to get to that tree. So I was like, I ranged him, and then
okay. Sorry. Yeah.
I stopped him. Then I got to the tree. I range him, and like he couldn't really see me, like, because I was kind of behind this. I mean, this tree is probably 7 feet tall. It's pretty small, and so I'm like kind of like just behind the tree. But then when I draw, I basically just stepped out in full view, and I wish I didn't feel rushed, but I was like, hurry, and like trying to settle that pin. And a little bit of it was, I mean, the sun was setting right behind him. So I got like a silhouette. I can't really pick a spot. And I was like, smooth off the trigger. It broke good, but something in my head was, and I was like listening, something in my head was like, it might be a touch right, which would have been back. So it might be a touch back. And like, throw my binos up. He spins. I didn't see anything. I heard it hit. And I was like, shot broke good. But I was like, just something about it felt like it might be a touchback. And I was like, instantly, my thought was like, just back out. A lot of that was like, back to your point, where like, I just did not feel confidence in that shot. And it was just like, and I wish I knew. It was like, man, I wish I knew. But I was like, it's not going to make a difference. If you feel like it's a touchback, like, and I was trying to visualize in my head, I'm like, where did it hit? But I literally could not see. I remember seeing my arrow go, but I couldn't tell you. I couldn't promise you to see the impact because the sun was like right behind him. And so I was like, just back out. So, and a lot of that was like the timber that he was in was only, I don't know, maybe 10 acres, like maybe even 5. Like it's a pretty small chunk of timber. And then it was like thousands of yards of sagebrush. So I'm like, if he gets past this timber, he's gone. Like I just won't be able to even figure it out. It's just so far, like
it's so hard to track in the sagebrush too,
dude. And that grass is just impossible. So I was like, I just backed out and I was like, okay, I want a glass. Like hopefully he'll stay in the timber long enough so I can get. So I backed out, and I wasn't like worried about it. I didn't feel that like gut, like I just screwed up. I was, it didn't feel like that. It was just like, I'm concerned. I think a lot of that concern was just like past, traumas of, this going wrong. And you're like, if I don't watch him fall in sight, I don't like it. It sucks.
Yeah.
And so I just back out. I didn't see him, but there was a 5 point right on the edge of the timber when I came around. So I'm like, gosh, I feel like he would have, busted that 5 point or something. So I'm like, that's a good sign. And then, a herd of elk, came right through, like as I'm watching, like as it's getting dark, a nice bull and a group of cows, like were coming up towards that timber patch. And I was like, well, hopefully they don't go in there, but like also a good sign, I feel like. So I show back up in the morning, like I couldn't sleep. So I was like way too early, and it's like still dark, and I'm like in the spot where I shot, and I'm trying to I'm like, okay. And I'm ranging it. And you know how it is, like it's just cracking daylight, and I'm trying to like figure out where I was. And of course, like my I ranged, I'm like 40. I was like, there's no way. I remember ranging 60. So instantly I'm like, oh no. And just in the twilight, I had like looked at the wrong lane. And so like when I went back, so I like looked at this and I was like, I know that. I was like, maybe it's dark in my rangefinder.
So then you really start second guessing yourself.
Oh dude, it was bad. Cause I go there and there's no blood, there's no arrow, there's no nothing. And I was just like, and so anyway, like about 20 minutes after daylight, I circle back and I'm like, thank God that was like off by 10 degrees. I was like, it was that gap, And so I range it. It's, same. That tree was 62. And I go there, but still, it's like the worst blood trail, of course, the specks. And I'm sinking, I'm like, oh God. And so it takes me about an hour and 15 minutes to go maybe 100 yards to like try to sort this out. He ran and then he like stopped and there was just a few drops of blood and then he turned, but it looked like he like turned to look at me where I would have been. And then he like went 2 ways and anyway, I couldn't figure it out. And I kind of was just like, and I was like, I think he went this way. He was still running. So at least I could track him from that. But I was really trying to like get blood drops. And so about an hour and a half after daylight, I'm like, oh no, like just sunk. And I was like, and I was, just sinking feeling. So I made one loop and sure enough, I ran right into him. He went, from where I shot, he went maybe 200 yards. He bedded down and he never got up. It was liver shot. And, I mean,
like
super
just dead center.
No, I would say, yeah, I mean, a little bit high back. I mean, I never opened it up. So I might have clipped the back of the lungs. But like that area, but he basically went 200 yards, laid down, and was like facing the back trail. And so I'm super happy. Like it all worked out. Like that's the way I've never had to do that. And never done that. And it actually worked out. But that's the way it's supposed to go. It's like, you back out and they're laying right there.
Yeah, dude, that is so unnerving. I know it's like totally cliche. Everybody writes this on their Instagram. It's such a roller coaster. Like especially you and I and many of the people that we interact with, like you think about this and work towards it all year, and it all is this culmination into this one split second moment. And it's like so fleeting. This moment may not appear again till 12 months from now. And then you think you did everything in your power right, and there's no blood, no arrow. And it's like it's and then you find him and then you're back to a high, and it's like, dude, I think your hormones are so fucked up.
So true.
Yeah, last year I shot at that bull, and it was very similar to where there was nothing to range. Like he walked, it all happened so fast. I had to guess, and I guessed 40, and I shot, and it felt good, but he ran off, and I sat there for a second, and then I walked down there to where he was, and he was kind of in this brush pile. This is in Oregon again, and there was no arrow, no blood. And I went back up, and I found something to range. Like I think I stuck. Actually, what I did is I stuck a stick in the ground where he was, and I went back up there and I ranged that stick, and I shot for 40, and it was 37 or something like that. And I'm like, well, shit. That's got to be right in there. I mean, there's not that big of a difference with my bow. Like I remember my 40 was where it was when that bow went off. Anyways, I wait an hour and I start like doing micro circles around there, and I can't find an arrow or blood. I still hear elk talking, and I'm like, what on earth? Did you just screw up the biggest bull of your life? Like your confidence is like literally at zero when it was just at, oh my God, I just killed this giant.
Yeah.
And finally I find the smallest pinprick of blood. This is when I started doing a little bit bigger circles, like maybe 20 yards, trying to find blood. Like I'm talking the size of a tack on one little weed. And I'm like, well, shit, great. But this isn't very promising. This isn't like, he's not like spitting blood out. Like this is like, you clipped him or you backstrapped him, or it was that type of thing. And usually, like I'd say, at least in my experience, 6 or 7 times out of 10, maybe even 8 times out of 10, those blood trails don't end well. They dry, there's nothing at the end. There's no golden pile. And I followed those little pinpricks for 100 yards, and pretty soon there was one little splatter, and I'm like, well, yeah, better, and then I looked to the left, and he was laying right there, which almost never happens. But I get it, man. It's like this flood of emotions, and confidence plays such a big role in all this, because in order to make like that move you made, right? That move when you stopped him and then you ran up to the tree and had the confidence to do that, pull your bow back and all those things. You have to have confidence to be that aggressive and make those moves. If your confidence is in the shitter, I think you actually make way more mistakes, because you overthink everything, and you got to be in and all in. And that's also why I think we hit big walls, because, because you have to hunt that way, especially if you're trying to kill those big bulls. Like in order to get that shot, I screwed up this year on that big one. I had to infiltrate those cows, which I had a high probability of getting busted. The fact that I made it 3 hours was almost never happens, but I was willing to take that risk to try to get that shot. That takes a little confidence. But when your confidence is in the shitter with the actual shot, it's the worst feeling in hunting, I think, because just getting a shot is hard enough. And you have to pull through this moment of high stress, and you have to have that confidence in that shot that you can make it. Otherwise, man, it's doom and gloom. So my confidence, honestly, I like what you said earlier. I'm a good shot. I've been shooting a bow since I was like 2 years old. I know how to shoot a bow. If I miss a shot, it's usually because I simply just freaked out, rushed it, and didn't go through my sequence and just made a bad shot. More often is some sort of technical difficulty, whether that be a bad range, a limb, some other circumstance. You just can't, especially in Western Oregon, you can't see every limb from there to the elk. Like it depends on where your aperture is with your eye. You ever tried that? Like where you're like, I'm going to focus. Oh, wow. Now I see that limb clearly. But at the time I didn't see it because it was blurred out. I was clear on the elk, So, but I want to go back to one thing you said, Cody. I actually think the right rule, or at least a principle to live by, is range the fucking elk. And it is really, really, really very difficult to do that because you feel like you're going to get busted, and you might. But I don't know. I almost feel like the benefits of it outweigh the risks. Because
like this comes from, 20 plus years and a lot of mistakes. And if I could go back, I would say the bulk of those mistakes were, feeling like I didn't have time to range. And I know that sounds crazy, but like, and this, in the early days, before you get a lot of this experience, before you spend a lot of time in the red zone, you're like, I don't have time. Like, you just like, I have to guess, like when you're in the chaos, like, and you haven't been there a lot, it's easy to start dropping steps and just be like, get the shot. You know what I mean? It's something I just beat in my head because I've had so many mistakes that were based on range that I'm like, range the fucking elk. Like that has to happen. And, that's really nice. And, going back to that one I missed, I screwed my own rule, right? Like I was trying, and I was ranging. I thought I was ranging the elk. I was in a hurry because I thought he was going to leave, which in retrospect, I wouldn't have taken that shot if he was like going to leave or it was rushed in any way. So that made no difference. Like I was like, hurry, he's right there. And even my gut told me the range better than my rangefinder, going back to what you said, because I remember thinking he's in range and like, I get this range. And then I was like, I'm not going to rush a long shot. So I sit there. Well, he sits there. Now I had all the damn time in the world to rearrange it, and check it. And I didn't. And I was like, that was dumb. And it was just like, I think a little bit of, big bull syndrome. You start making errors when like, this is like, this big bull, this is supposed to happen, like all these things. If that was a 300-inch bull, I would not have cared. Like I would just like, range his eyeball. It's just like you make mistakes when the pressure is on and it's high pressure to you. All those situations are different. Like I get that like some people are like a raghorn is high pressure to you. That's going to be for a long time. For many years, 5 points were high pressure to me. So like everyone has their own version of high pressure, but you can't let your steps slip. It's not your morals. It's not your like whatever. I know there's people like, and people don't talk about this, but they make bad shots. They force shots when they shouldn't. Like I've heard more stories of like, I just wanted to make him bleed. And I'm like, what? Like, no. And like, those are crazy things that happen and nobody talks about them for new hunters, but don't slip on the steps, going through your shooting process. If like you follow a lot of Joel Turner stuff, like go through your shooting process. If you're like, don't skip the step of actually ranging the damn elk. You have time or you don't have a shot. It's like, that's, at least for me, I've made too many mistakes to not fall into that. Like that's a new hard rule.
I think in 35 years of bow hunting, I think that's also my number one mistake is I always, when you're under that stress, like the peak amount of stress, you always feel like you got to get it off now. It's finally working out and I got to get it out right now. He's going to move. But then if you think back to all those situations, in my case, there's so many, unfortunately. Every single time, I bet you at least 90% of the time I had more time. And in some of those cases, I had all the time in the world. I could have just wait. Like he wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't going anywhere. In fact, even this bull that I hit last week, to be honest with you, I probably should have just let him keep coming. But I'm like, he's already in range. I'm going to shoot him right there. But like, if I would have had my recurve, I would have let him walk another 20 yards. And so I probably could have shot him at 20 yards. Who knows? But we have this thing we do where we finally get the encounter we want. And we're like, I got to get it out. I got to get it out. And I've seen with my dad and like Eric Erickson, another mentor of mine who's a great hunter, and he's in his 70s now. He had a Walla Walla tag this year. And he was telling me, I can't remember exactly what he said. Something about like sometimes people just shoot to tell their buddies they got a shot. Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, you get older, I'm going to take the right shots and I don't need to shoot. Like, I don't care. You win. I'm not in a competition to see who can get. So I think and I need to do this too, believe me, I'm like icing my balls after this season, but like you almost always have more time than you think. Almost always. Even that big bull that I missed through that opening, I think I probably could have ranged him. I think I probably could have ranged. They didn't know I was there. I was just worried I was within a few seconds of having to get of getting busted. Right. But man, I wish I could have that back, but I guess there's always next year. So what's your plan now? You got your archery bowl. What's on the docket now? You just back to work, or you got more adventures planned?
So I go to taking the kid antelope hunting this coming weekend. I'm just gonna go shoot antelope with him, like total like, hey, take the kid hunting. And then I have a Idaho rifle tag, and then in November I go to Arizona. I got an Arizona rifle tag. So I got 3 pretty good elk tags this year. So yeah, got one off the docket. Now I'm like on to rifle hunting. So, which I'm stoked about. I enjoy rifle hunting. And now the freezer's full. Like I get a little leeway.
Well, we are down to like 5 packages of elk burger, and I also have an Idaho rifle tag and a Montana rifle tag. So I'm going to Idaho next week, and I called my buddy who I'm going with today, and I'm like, hey, dude, 5 points, 5x4s, beware, because this is not a trophy hunt. This is we're hunting bull elk. Even though I know there's some big ones in the area we're going to. I'm not. My Montana tag, maybe. Depends on which area I go to, but I think some of those rifle hunts are harder than archery hunts, personally.
Oh, I think Montana for sure. Rifle in Montana, I think, is harder than archery.
I totally agree with you.
Some of that's pressure. Like, there's a lot of pressure. And then some of it's like, just the timing. It's tough, dude. Hunting in Montana is very difficult because it's so cold and miserable. Like, logistically, it's hard. It's a hard hunt.
And I know you got a hard stop. You're one of the first people I thought about after I got out of the woods that I want to have a wrap with, because I saw this very cryptic picture on your Instagram of the shadow of your bull, but I still haven't gotten a picture in my text messages of your bull. Oh, really? I'd love to see it.
I'll text it to you.
I'd love to see it, and congrats. And what a great story, man. I love hearing some stories that work out as well. So
yeah, dude, I'm sorry your season went the way it did. That's brutal. I feel like yours hurts worse because I know Roosevelt's, and I know how tough it is to get that shot. So it's like, man, when you do, it's like I feel like in Montana, shots come and go. Roosevelt shots do not come and go.
No, not at the bulls like that. I mean, those are like, yeah. And I mean, where he lives, I actually measured it. 5,000 acres of absolute hell that's like almost unpenetrable. And I was telling my buddy yesterday, I might have been the only human that saw that bull this year. I don't think
that's
he ever
crazy.
Gets hunted. So I guess they'll be next year. Yeah. Well, dude, I hope you have good luck in Idaho and Montana, and let's do this again. I want to talk some entrepreneurship and a little bit of biz, because I know you're always working on something. You're always scheming.
I am. Yeah, I'm building. I'll tell everyone what it is soon, but not quite yet. So just keep teasing a little bit. So
Okay.
I'm just gonna lock myself in the on a computer for the winter and see what happens afterwards.
I love it, man. All right. Well, good luck in Idaho.
All right, thanks, man. You too.